Your rights or my life. Going out in public today is like going out for Halloween. Sometimes you see more masks than when kids are going trick or treating. But by mandate in 33 states, people are required to wear masks. Um, what I wanted to talk very briefly about today is just what's the issue with this? As much fuss has been made about masks or face coverings that has been made, masks have been worn since antiquity to protect people from the spread of disease, for their safety, as well as for the safety of others for various reasons. I mean, we can look all the way back to Genesis, the beginning of mankind, where Rebecca covered her face the first time she met Isaac. She asked, "What man is this that walks from the field to me?" And she covered her face. In Exodus 34:33, Moses wears a veil. In Isaiah 6 and 2, we see that the angels even cover their faces in an angelic scene of heaven. Above it stood by the seraphims, each one had 6 wings. With twain he covered his face. These angels' coverings of their faces with the wings, angels in the presence of God cover their faces. So Moses covered his face, Rebecca covered her face, angels covered their face. Though for very different reasons, there is nothing sacrilegious about putting on a face covering in and of itself. So let me say this country has a lot of issues, but there is a lot of greatness. And one of those beauties, as crazy as it may sound at a time like this, is our inclination for rebelliousness. This nation was born out of rebellion, but there is a time to fight and there is a time to heed power, the government, especially when it comes to the benefit for all of its people. So is it more important? What's more important? Your personal rights or my life? Your rights or my life? Well, this issue about masks, it should be a non-issue, but it is a portrayal of our pursuit of these personal rights, our Bill of Rights, versus the rights of others. So let me step back. What is the role of government? Okay, does the government even have a right to require us to wear masks? Well, per our Constitution, the United States Constitution, we are based. It states we are based on our government's rights. Our federal government's rights are based on the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution contains two references to the general welfare. Right, one occurring in the preamble, the other one in the taxing and spending clause. Right. So just in basic terms, the U.S. Supreme Court has held that the general welfare clause, well, let me back up. It states that we, the people of the United States, and then it lists a number of things that the Constitution was written for. And one of those clauses is the general welfare. All right. And what is general welfare? The general welfare is the concern of the government for the what? The health, peace, morality, general safety of its citizens, right? Health being at the forefront. Congress appropriates money. So the preamble states that it's for the general welfare of its people, of the people it governs. But then Congress also appropriates money for a seamlessly innumerable number of interests, ranging from federal courts to policing to imprisonment, national security, social programs, environmental protection, education, and not the least of which is health. No federal court has ever struck down a spending program on the basis of its failure to promote general welfare. So, in essence, it's a pretty large umbrella. The government has the right to legislate and then enforce laws under this general welfare edict. So, what's more important, your rights or my life? We're so at odds about this mask issue. There's hundreds, thousands of stories, but I think two capture it. Some Americans are refusing to wear facial coverings, like I said, out of this principle of it's my right, I don't have to, and or the government can't make me. But you have that's on one side, and on the other side you have people enraged because of the danger they feel they're unnecessarily being subjected to. Bob Palgrim is a restaurant owner in Mission, Texas. He owns RJ's BBQ Shack, right? He told the customer to wear a mask inside of his restaurant. But the customer, a man in his 40s, wearing a MAGA hat, had flashed a gun and said that he was exempt from the statewide mandate to wear masks. In other words, he was above the law. He was above the law. He said that he could explain the exemption to the law to Mr. Palgrim, the restaurant owner. Mr. Palgrim, now a former Marine, told the customer that he was not interested in continuing this conversation and that he was not swayed by the customer's gun and either coronavirus, and because coronavirus doesn't care if he had a gun or not. Mr. Palgrim, then describing this conversation with the customer, said, "Now get out of my restaurant," in some other choice terms. Now, I read this one and it just sort of made me chuckle. When workers in Michigan pizzeria told the customer that she had to wear a mask, this woman gave them an obscene gesture. You can imagine, and then just kicked the random customer in the restaurant and then ran out. Now that just invokes a kind of a funny visual to me: a grown woman kicking somebody then running. Is this about your rights or my life? Now, research data shows masks significantly reduce aerosol saliva that emits from a person while speaking, coughing, sneezing, anything where you open your mouth and project. It keeps those droplets from carrying the virus to someone else. But now, as I said, that's the science. That's what we know. But then you still have some conservative Christian groups, libertarians, and others object to wearing masks they just outright refuse, despite the science now, right? Well, as we well know, this week, just a couple of days ago, our president and at least a bare minimum of 9 of his family and cohorts have been infected with COVID-19. Now, it's well documented his disdain for masking, but the CDC has found that masking helps. So what's this about? Your rights or my life? The CDC has found that women are more likely than men to say that they always wear a mask in public. Why is that? Because men are macho. Men are less likely because they seriously less likely to believe that they will be seriously affected by COVID-19. I mean, it generally speaks to our sense of immortality, though we're reminded of it because death surrounds us. But then also because many men think that wearing a mask is less than manly. It's a sign of weakness, which is kind of crazy because most of these superheroes that we go to the movies to tout on wear masks. 62% of respondents said the decision to wear a mask is more about public health than personal choice. So thankfully, almost 2/3 of the public understands this issue. And 69% said it's respectful to wear masks in public. So 69% get that the respectfulness, it's about the other person to wear a mask. So you're almost at 70%. So why don't all people wear masks? Well, here's some of the top reasons. People don't wear masks because you still have a section of society that think this is politically driven. It's a scare tactic. They're not fully convinced of the efficacy of wearing masks, that wearing masks helps. They don't believe the CDC. This era where nobody tells the truth, everybody's lying. Lies are rampant, but not everything is a lie. In interviews in the Midwest across the United States, people dug their heels in and defended their position, whether for or against wearing masks. Many of those interviewed sounded deeply mistrustful of the people on the other side and blamed them for the nation's economic and public health crisis. I have my thoughts on that. The concerns about COVID are overblown. Again, another reason that people shouldn't wear masks. Sure, there's a virus, but people die of the flu every year. Sounds like one of those really early arguments, but they're still making it. When it comes to the pandemic, I don't fall for this. It's not what they say it is. In other words, hey, this isn't as big as it is. Let's downplay it. It's not a big deal. This is the classic American struggle between those who defend public safety and those who believe just as deeply in personal liberty. Your rights or my life. There are people in power who want to see what people are willing to submit to. That's an interesting one that I've heard. Elements of the U.S. government are trying to shut down Christian worship. The Reverend John MacArthur of Grace Community Church, and he's one of the most esteemed one of the most esteemed preachers in our nation, John MacArthur, who heads the Grace Community Church in California, indicates that there are people in power who want to see what people will submit to, and there are elements in the U.S. government trying to shut down Christian worship. I'm here to say enough. This is John MacArthur. I'm here to say enough. If mask wearing prohibited anyone, well, mind you, he said, I'm here to say enough. Period. But if mask wearing prohibited anyone from being faithful to Christ, reflecting God's image, as a senator Vitale from Ohio posed as his reason for opposing wearing masks. He's saying that if you wear a mask, you're cutting off our ability to reflect God's image because we're created in God's image. So merely wearing a mask will stop us from being able to do that. But sporting a face covering along with other reasonable precautions to stop this virus are actually all about adhering to Christ's command. So you have this side that's saying wearing these masks is anti-Christ, and then you have the notion that wearing a mask is actually doing what Christ commands. So what's the basis for that? When Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, was questioned as to what's the greatest of the commands, what did he respond? He gave a response, two-headed response. Love God, love your neighbor. And if you do those, you're adhering to all of the important edicts of the Old Testament. All the laws of Moses and all the books of the prophets are based on these two commands. Jesus never, and so what were they? Love God, love your neighbor, right? Jesus never mentioned personal rights. Never mentioned them. So if MacArthur and or whoever else, Vitale, whoever else may think that the most important rights that he and his congregation can do in this crisis is to assert their doctrinal beliefs and illegal rights, that's the most important thing they can do, assert their doctrinal rights and legal rights, I would just challenge them, challenge them with, what did Jesus say? What did Jesus do? Jesus gave up his personal rights, possibly the most important one, his right to live. For what? For all of our benefit, for the collective good. He gave up probably, again, the most important right for so that we could live, so that we can. Loving God is one thing, but we get caught up sometimes in what does this thing about loving your neighbor really mean? Well, first off, who's our neighbor? I mean, I've talked about this extensively. Our neighbor is our neighbor, is the person we come in contact with, it's the person we touch, the person we see. But when Jesus was asked who's our neighbor, he gave the story of the Good Samaritan. And who did he respond the Good Samaritan was? Even those who have no love for God see the value in the Good Samaritan story. It's the person who acted with grace. The bottom line of the story is the one who acted with compassion, the one who acted with grace, the one who was hospitable, the one who was caring. He was the one who was neighborly. So we know who the neighbor is, but what are the traits of a good neighbor? What are the traits of loving your neighbor? Love protects. Philippians 2:4 says, let each of you look not only to his own self-interests. Don't look out for you. Don't look out just for you, but also the interest of others. Loving your neighbor as yourself is to look out for others' well-being. God, who is love, came to serve. So love serves. For you to love your neighbor as yourself, you'll have to have a heart to serve them. And what does serve mean? It means you undergird, you support, you do what you can to lift them up, to support them, to do good for them. Your life, your rights, or my life. Asserting rights is all about me. Okay, it's about me. What can I do? What am I entitled to? Wearing a mask is all about it's about keeping me protected, but it's also more so about keeping you protected. It's a display of my concern for my health as well as yours. It's demonstrating concern for the feelings and well-beings of others. The second command. Face coverings do protect the wearer, but they don't protect the wearer as much as they protect the persons or the people the wearer encounters. The Apostle Paul summarizes the practical implications of love. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to your self interest, your own interests, but also the interests of others. Just had to repeat that. Wearing masks reduces the need for shutdown orders as fewer people will become sick. We all want to reopen society to keep businesses from failing, workers from losing their jobs, and by extension, this preserves the security of our households because we're dependent on the income that these jobs provide. Wearing a mask is a small burden. It's a very small burden. Like I said, people do it for Halloween. People do it for whatever other reasons. Cosplay, Halloween, going to sporting events, going to the gym, people wear masks. It's a small burden for all the good that it does. After all, most of us will put on a hat to protect our head when it gets cold, cover our mouths when we sneeze in the midst of others. Some wrap a scarf around our face, put on a veil, put on a mask to keep from getting chapped when it's winter. If we'll do these things to protect ourselves from something so basic, we can definitely sport a mask to spare someone something so potentially stifling, to protect someone from something so potentially deadly. Wearing a mask is not only considerate and polite, but it's biblical. Your rights or my life. Love your neighbor.